that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you are dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin, here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. Freedom in AmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Happy to be with you once again. Obamacare has been declared unconstitutional for at least the second time. You may recall back in 2011, in the state of Florida, Justice Roger Vinson of the U.S. District Court in Pensacola ruled that the primary mechanism used by the legislation to achieve universal insurance coverage, that would be the individual mandate, was illegal. From that ruling, because the individual mandate is unconstitutional and not severable, the entire act must be declared void. This has been a difficult decision to reach, and I am aware that it will have indeterminable implications. What did he mean when he said it was not severable? The way the Democrats wrote the law, they were very sloppy, and it was very poorly written. One of the things that they did that was sloppy, normally when you write large bills, massive legislation, you make its provisions severable so that if any are challenged, you can continue with the law with what remains. The Democrats did not do that. There was no way to get rid of the mandate and have the law go forward because they put no provisions in the law for that to occur. Fox 10 in the Pensacola area reported on the finding and the ruling in this manner back in January of 2011.
A federal judge in Pensacola has ruled that Congress's attempt at health care overhaul is unconstitutional. The judge accepted the argument of 26 states, including Alabama, Florida, and Mississippi, that the new law violated people's rights by forcing them to buy health insurance. Fox 10 News reporter John Rogers joins us live from the Pensacola Federal Courthouse with more. John?
Hey there, Bob. I got the ruling right here. 78 pages filed by U.S. District Judge Roger Vinson earlier today here at the courthouse in Pensacola. I'm going to read you the final summary here. It says, it is hereby declared, adjudged, and decreed that the Patient Protection and Affordable Care Act is unconstitutional. One of the cruxes of the argument is what you were mentioning earlier, Bob, the clause that states that all Americans must buy health insurance or face a penalty. The judge says that's unconstitutional. Congress argues that their health care overhaul cannot work unless all Americans have insurance. Therefore, the judge said the entire bill is unconstitutional. Today, President Obama's plans for healthcare overhaul met an obstacle inside this courthouse. Judge Roger Vinson filed this 78-page ruling without taking the issue to trial. In the document, Vinson wrote, "This case is not about whether the act is wise or unwise legislation. It's about the constitutional role of the federal government." 26 states were suing the federal government. The states objected to the federal expansion of Medicaid, saying it violated the Constitution. But the judge threw out their argument, siding with Congress on that issue. But the clincher was the argument against the individual mandate, the clause of the act that requires all Americans to buy insurance or face a penalty. This took up a bulk of the document, where the district judge pointed out how the entire healthcare overhaul is dependent on all Americans having insurance. He felt the individual mandate was unconstitutional. But Congress feels this healthcare overhaul cannot work without this mandate. So Judge Vinson decided, because the individual mandate is unconstitutional and not severable, the entire act must be declared void. Bob, in this report, Judge Vinson said that the healthcare system in America does have a myriad of problems, and Congress can fix it. He said there's some provisions in the healthcare bill that could work without this individual mandate. So Vinson suggested that Congress go back, look at the bill, pick out which provisions can work without this mandate, and go from there. Right now, it looks like the case will go on to the U.S. Supreme Court. Bob?
All right, thank you, John.
And it did go on to the U.S. Supreme Court. Gee. And at the court, Chief Justice John Roberts rewrote the law. Because for those who pay attention to these things, the individual mandate was pointedly and poignantly not declared a tax by the Democrats in Congress. They went out of their way not to call it a tax. But John Roberts decided that it was a tax, and therefore, because of the 16th Amendment, which gives Congress unlimited power to tax, he determined that it was constitutional to have that mandate. Now, he alienated himself on that particular ruling from the rest of the quote-unquote conservatives on the court, because it was a 5-4 decision. But we got stuck with Obamacare. Republicans tried unsuccessfully for years to undo Obamacare. I really say they didn't try, because you could always do certain things, and they just tried the blunt force method. We're going to vote, knowing that couldn't succeed, and therefore they never took a serious shot at the law. However, in the age of Trump, somebody who actually thinks more like a business person than a politician, and one of the things about business people is they're less concerned about obstacles than they are about fixes. There's always a way. Well, with this particular president at the helm, in November of last year, Congress actually found a way, and Fox Business News personality Kennedy, in her inimitable manner, reported on what they found and how they frustrated the Obamacare Act in this manner.
After multiple political embarrassments, short votes, and wasted opportunities, Senate Republicans may actually achieve the impossible, killing Obamacare by turfing the individual mandate. The Senate tax plan proposes spiking the mandate that the Supreme Court ruled is a constitutional tax. Thanks, John Roberts. And although professional pearl clutchers and pathological hand-wringers worry mixing taxes and health care may be a toxic combo, they have to remember the individual mandate is, because of that ruling, a tax. And I know this is supposed to be about tax reform, which leads the frustrated chorus to shout in unison, "Why didn't you boobs think of this earlier?" Killing the individual mandate collapses Obamacare because now there's no mechanism forcing healthy people to buy expensive insurance they don't need. And you silly nitwits in Congress didn't think of this 4 months ago or 7 years ago? All it took was removing this Jenga block for the whole thing to fall apart, but it didn't occur to you, mouth-breathing simpletons, to take this one simple action? My God, you suck at your jobs. The worry is there will be more uninsured people, up to 4 million in the first year alone. That's too many people to fit in my crawl space. But in reality, it's just over 1% of the population, and most of those uninsured are foregoing coverage by choice. That's the dirty little freedom secret no one wants to whisper because it goes against the emotionalist narrative that health insurance is being cruelly ripped away from your poor, sickly, cave-dwelling, morphine-addled grandma. There are problems with this tax plan that need to be reconciled. This is not one of them. So make like Larry the Cable Guy and get her done. I'm sure there are plenty of opportunities for all of this to fall apart. And don't worry, I'm sure wannabe Senator Roy Moore will ride in on his white horse to save the day. Or not.
That is the question. Why didn't you just zero out the tax 7 years ago? Or more accurately, in 2014, when the Senate and the House were in the hands of the Republicans who had been vowing since 2010 to get rid of this law, why did it not occur to them to do what was done in 2017? Well, Obama wouldn't have signed it, but you could have threatened a government shutdown. So we're not going to take away your law. We're just going to basically say that we're going to go back to our original intent and change it so that it is not a tax. And how do we do that? We zero the tax. Could have done it then, didn't want to do it then. Why? Because inside the Beltway, the Republican Party does not oppose Obamacare. I'm sorry. They don't. Because what was done could have been done at any time after January 2015, while Obama was still president. They didn't do it. Well, once you strip the 16th Amendment protection, because that's where the taxing authority Congress has comes from, once you strip that away by having no tax there, all of a sudden the individual mandate had to stand on its own. And here's how it did.
A federal judge in Texas striking down Obamacare, ruling it unconstitutional. U.S. District Judge Reed O'Connor in Fort Worth agreed with a Republican-led coalition of 20 states who brought the lawsuit. U.S. President Donald Trump, speaking to reporters Saturday, called it a great ruling for our country.
And on the assumption that the Supreme Court upholds, we will get great health care for our people. We'll have to sit down with the Democrats to do it, but I'm sure they want to do it also.
While the Supreme Court upheld Obamacare in 2012 based on Congress's right to set taxes, last year Congress reduced the penalty tax for not having health insurance to zero. The judge ruled that without Congress applying a tax, the individual mandate is now unconstitutional, and therefore the entire law is unconstitutional. The 2010 law was the signature domestic policy achievement of former U.S. President Barack Obama. Republicans have opposed the plan since its inception and have repeatedly tried and failed to repeal it.
The rates are going through the sky.
O'Connor, a judge appointed by George W. Bush, announced his decision just a day before the end of the sign-up period for 2019 health coverage under the law. Government officials say Friday's ruling will not have any immediate effect, but the decision almost certainly will be appealed and could make its way to the Supreme Court, where the landmark health law could be struck down, threatening the health care of nearly 12 million Americans.
They always put that emotional lie at the end. This is threatening the health care or health insurance of millions of Americans. What they do not tell you was the thing that Kennedy intimated. And how many of these people, if they weren't forced to buy health insurance, would have bought it anyway, and particularly at the rates associated with Obamacare? Remember, Obamacare was having people who were perfectly healthy buy insurance they did not need. Young men were being asked to buy pregnancy insurance or lactating insurance to cover all these things. Why? Because that got the price up, that got the premium high enough, even though they could never use it, they're biologically unprepared to use it, but it got the revenues up to cover everybody else. It screwed them, but it took care of somebody else. Sorry, that's not the way America works. So, let's see, we have a judge in Texas. We had a judge in Florida. Oh, back at the same time the judge in Florida ruled that it was unconstitutional, another judge in Virginia did the same thing. His name was Henry Hudson. So you have three rulings that this is unconstitutional, and one in the middle happened to come from Justice Roberts, and of course he's on the Supreme Court, so people think that's a bigger deal. Well, guess what? He's not going to be able to rewrite this thing this time the way he did last time. Obamacare has problems, everybody. They've been exposed. And all it took was the election of one Donald Trump to find a simple, yet some might call it innovative solution for the Republican Party to do what they said they had wanted to do since 2010. Now, will this go to the Supreme Court? I don't know. What's the basis of appeal? They may not appeal it. They may simply accept that the will of the people, well, they are Democrats. They're probably not going to accept that. Nevertheless, the law continues until this year is over. And then, guess what? No tax, no Obamacare. We'll see if there's going to be an appeal. I'd say it's even money with my money, if I were a betting man, saying that I don't know that they think it's worth the effort, particularly since the Department of Justice is not going to defend the law. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB, News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, the government shutdown, and there's some air quotes around the word shutdown, cometh. Let's explain my title, why I say shutdown in air quotes, because the government never shuts down. They simply take the unessential people and send them home for a time until they figure out when they're going to open up the government again. And once they bring the government back online, so to speak, or those parts that were shuttered, they bring those people back, those government employees, and pay them for every day of work that they missed. So what happens during a government shutdown? You find out who doesn't matter to running the federal government. Which brings us to the question, if you're telling me that I can run the federal government without these unessential people, then why do I even have them? Why don't I always run the government in this shutdown situation? Because the military still gets paid. They're essential. Congress still gets paid. They're considered essential. Welfare payments and the like, all this stuff continues to go on. All you do is take non-essential services offline until such time as you agree to fund them. That is a government shutdown. And guess what? The overwhelming majority, more than 95% of the people in this country, don't care and are not affected by the government when it shuts down. Well, what about, you said the military? Yes, I was incorrect about that. They don't get paid during the shutdown. They get paid afterward, and they get every dollar that they did not get paid. Well, that could be disruptive to people's lives. What about the people who can't pay their rent? Do you really think that a landlord does not understand the game that the government plays? They've done this quite a few times. They've done this a few times. And they know the money's coming. So do you get rid of a government worker who is probably someone who's a relatively steady rent payer over something that's not within his control or her control, and then go out and see if you can find a better tenant? Or do you just allow the government to work out its differences, because they always do, and then get your rent back, and you might even ask for a late fee, a late payment? Hey, now that we've dealt with that, the issue that's coming up that may shut the government down this time is border security. If you want to be specific to the extent that that matters, it is funding the wall between the U.S. and Mexico on the southern border of the U.S., something that Donald Trump campaigned upon, and I'm sorry, he won. He won, saying that we needed a wall to separate the two countries. Well, we've had the midterm where the Democrat Party took over the House and became an even smaller minority in the Senate. And so Donald Trump took the unusual step, in my mind, of calling in the presumptive Speaker of the House when Congress next has session, which would be Nancy Pelosi, and the still minority leader in the Senate, Chuck Schumer, to discuss how they might avoid possibly the air quote shutdown of the government. And this was fascinating television because they did this all in the Oval Office in front of TV cameras.
And then we have the easy one, the wall. That'll be the one that will be the easiest of all. What do you think, Chuck? Maybe not?
It's called funding the government, Mr. President.
I think the American people recognize that we must keep government open, that a shutdown is not worth anything, and that you should not have a Trump shutdown. You have the White House, a Trump shutdown. You have the White House. You have the Senate. You have the House of Representatives. You have the votes. You should pass it.
No, we don't
right
have
now.
the votes, Nancy, because in the Senate we need 60 votes.
No, but in the House,
and we don't
you
have.
could bring it up right now.
Yeah, but I
today.
can't, excuse me, but I can't get it passed in the House if it's not going to pass in the Senate. I don't want to waste time.
Well, the fact is, you can get it started that way.
It doesn't help for me to take a vote in the House where I will win easily with the Republicans.
You will not win.
It doesn't help to take that vote because I'm not going to get the vote
Don't
of
put
the
on
Senate. I need 10 senators. That's
Mr.
the problem.
President, you have the White House. You have the Senate.
I have the
you
White House. The White
of
House is done. And the House would give me the vote if I wanted it. But I can't because I need, Nancy, I need 10 votes from Chuck.
All right, let me say something here.
Let me just say one thing. The fact is, you do not have the votes in the House.
Nancy, I do. And we need border security. Nancy, we need border security. It's very simple.
Of course we do.
We need border security.
We do.
People are pouring into our country, including terrorists. We have terrorists. We caught 10 terrorists over the last very short period of time. 10. These are very serious people. Our border agents, all of our law enforcement has been incredible what they've done. But we caught 10 terrorists. These are people that were looking to do harm.
We have a proposal that Democrats and Republicans will support to do a CR that will not shut down the government. We urge you to take it.
And if it's not good border security, I won't take it.
It is very good border security.
And if it's not good border security, I won't take it.
We're coming in good faith to negotiate with you about how we can keep the government
open.
We're going to keep it open if we have border security. If we don't have border security, Chuck, we're not going to keep it open.
I'm with you. We are going to have border security.
And it's the same border. You're bragging about what has been done. We want to do the same thing we did last year, this year. That's our proposal. If it's good then, it's good now, and it won't shut down the government.
Chuck, we can build a much bigger section with more money.
Let's debate in private.
You know what I'll say? Yes. If we don't get what we want, one way or the other, whether it's through you, through a military, through anything you want to call, I will shut down the government.
Okay,
absolutely.
fair enough.
And I am proud, and I'll tell you what,
disagree.
I am proud to shut down the government for border security, Chuck, because the people of this country don't want criminals and people that have lots of problems and drugs pouring into our country. So I will take the mantle. I will be the one to shut it down. I'm not going to blame you for it. The last time you shut it down, it didn't work. I will take the mantle of shutting down. And I'm going to shut it down for border
But we
security.
believe you shouldn't shut it down.
Thank you very much, everybody.
That is extraordinary. So let's kind of break this down a little bit. They're coming in, and the issue is whether or not we're going to keep the government fully open, as opposed to less than fully open, which still takes care of the needs of more than 95, 96, 97, 98% even, or even more, of the American people. So we're really arguing about what it takes to keep that other 2% open. And the president said, fine, you give me border security, we'll keep the government open. Why would the Democrats, if their issue is keeping the government open, and they agree, as Nancy Pelosi said twice during that segment, which is very much edited, that conversation took more than 15 minutes, and NBC broke that down to a little 3-minute clip. But she said on more than one occasion, of course we want border security, then why are you arguing with the president? Give him his money for border security, and the government stays open. It's not as though the Democrats care about the deficit. considering what happened to the deficit under Barack Obama, while the Democrats controlled the Senate for most of the time he was president. Hello. So it can't be that. It can't be that when the Democrats ran up the deficit under George W. Bush, because Congress controls the purse strings. So it can't be because they're concerned about money or the lack thereof. What is it they're concerned about? Now, Donald Trump made it very clear. I will shut down the government if I don't get border security. And Chuck Schumer is saying, well, we don't want you to shut the government down. I guess he thinks that's not as important. And he seems to have a different take on immigration and security for the nation than Donald Trump in 2018. However, back in 2009, Chuck Schumer gave a speech in which he said the following, which is remarkable, coming from him, coming from any Democrat, regarding illegal immigration.
First of these 7 principles is that illegal immigration is wrong, plain and simple. Until the American people are convinced that we will stop future flows of illegal immigration, we will make no progress on dealing with the millions of illegal immigrants who are here now and on rationalizing our system of legal immigration. It's plain and simple and unavoidable. When we use phrases like undocumented workers, we convey a message to the American people that their government is not serious about combating illegal immigration, which the American people overwhelmingly oppose. If you don't think it's illegal, you're not going to say it. I think it is illegal and wrong, and we have to change it. Above all else, the American people want their government to be serious about protecting the public, enforcing the rule of law, and creating a rational system of legal immigration that will proactively fit our needs rather than reactively responding to future waves of illegal immigration.
Somebody tell me how that doesn't sound like Donald Trump's words coming out of Chuck Schumer's mouth. And if that's what Chuck Schumer still believes, and apparently it is not, why would there even be a disagreement whereby the government would be shut down? Let's make sure we understand something. The Democrats don't care who owns the shutdown. They're going to go out there and they're going to put it on Trump, and Trump's already said, I'll take it. Not a problem. We shut down the government, it's on me. Got it. Let's get her done. Why is it that the Democrats don't want the government shut down? Maybe you forgot what happened the last time the government got shut down. That was before the 2014 midterms. What happened in the 2014 midterms? Because they had already lost the House in the 2010 midterms. In 2014, they lost the Senate after a government shutdown in which the GOP was widely blamed. And the interesting thing to me is if you go back and look at the news at that time, you had Republican after Republican, particularly in the House, which I don't know why it was their deal, but they're part of government, who were saying this is dumb. You had GOP senators, we shouldn't shut down the government, this is bad, we're going to get blamed, we're going to look bad to the voters. And you took the majority in the Senate after the government shut down. Why don't the Democrats want the government to be shut down? It's very, very simple. Because they know that the American people see through them. And if the government is seen as not necessary, they already have unpopular positions. And they have no hope of imposing their agenda unless government is fully operational. It's really simple. If the government shuts down, the Democrats are going to lose in the next election cycle, and they know it. So they got to keep it open. Which means Trump may get exactly what he's asking for. He may. Or Chuck Schumer may be presiding over an increasingly smaller minority of Democrats in the Senate. Democrats lie Fortunately, the internet does not forget, so we have what Chuck Schumer said in 2009, as he's now trying to act as though Donald Trump, by trying to do exactly what Chuck Schumer said needed to be done back in 2009, now Mr. Schumer wants to say that Donald Trump is doing something wrong and he is creating a crisis. No, Mr. Schumer, there's already a crisis, one about which you've done nothing for the last 9 years. Now, we know that you are as safe a Senate seat as there is, but you're on a shrinking island, and you are smart enough to know that if the government shuts down, your island will become smaller. But if the people of the United States can't trust you to protect them, then why do they need you? If the government's not going to make the border secure, then exactly what is the government useful for? Why do we need a government that's going to allow people to come in from the outside and ravage American citizens? That's what this is about, Mr. Schumer. And I'm sorry you don't see it. And if the government shuts down, I know what's going to happen. So if you want to protect your interests, build the dang wall. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin'. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let me go back a little bit back to that last segment, because there's something I wanted to say and I just ran out of time. Can someone explain why Republicans who consistently benefit at the polls whenever the government is shut down, why they would be opposed to shutting the government down? You would think that they would say, oh, you want to shut the government down over a principle that we're taking, which is protecting the country? Fine. Shut that puppy down. And let's see what happens in the next November in an even-numbered year, the first Tuesday after a Sunday. I would do that in a heartbeat. But Republicans regularly go on TV when a government shutdown is looming and they wring their hands and they say how dumb it is, even though they win every time. That tells you that the Republican Party in D.C. is not concerned about you. They're concerned about themselves. What happens is they don't get to do as much. They still get paid, as far as I know. And they have the lightest work schedule as far as showing up for work as anyone in the country who makes 6 figures. Well, legally makes 6 figures. So why they oppose it, I have no idea. If I were an elected official, which is not likely to occur in this lifetime, anytime I took a stand and the Democrats said they wanted to shut down the government, I would have a 2-word response: bring it. Bring it. Anyway, moving on to the next thing. The Department of Justice, according to New York Magazine, just called Donald Trump a felon. Wow. They published this story on the 7th of December. Federal prosecutors released sentencing recommendations for 2 alleged criminals who worked closely with Donald Trump, Michael Cohen and Paul Manafort. They are filled with damning details, but the most important passage by far is this about Trump's fixer. Cohen himself has now admitted with respect to both payments he acted in coordination with and at the direction of Individual 1. Individual 1 is Donald Trump. The payments in question, as the document explains, concern a payoff to 2 women who claimed to have affairs with Trump. The payments, according to prosecutors, were intended to influence the campaign. Really? Really? The payments were intended... Okay. And thereby constituted violations of federal campaign finance law. They have not formally charged Trump with his crime, and more than likely they will not. It is a sentencing report for Cohen, not Trump. But this is the U.S. Department of Justice calling Trump a criminal. No, it's not. But this is what we've been dealing with since the election. The idea that because certain people don't like Trump, they can take anything that comes out with anyone else who is connected to Trump and find a way to interpret it, view it through the appropriate lens, and make Trump seem like a monster, or worse. Back to the article. There is more. Under normal circumstances, the long list of charges federal prosecutors cited against Michael Cohen would be a political catastrophe for President Trump. One of the president's closest associates turns out to have allegedly committed a long stream of crimes, from tax evasion to making false statements to a financial institution that would besmirch the good name of the man who worked at his side for years. Seriously? Let's back up here. Tax evasion. Robert Mueller has Donald Trump's tax returns. He has them. If Michael Cohen's tax evasion had anything to do with Donald Trump, we would have heard about that a long time ago. Remember, they couldn't get Al Capone for the St. Valentine's Day massacre. They got him, and he ended up on that island in the San Francisco Bay for tax evasion. If they had Donald Trump for tax evasion, this would have been over. The Mueller investigation could have been over a year ago. They don't have it. Now, the interesting thing to me is this bogosity that we're speaking, that all of a sudden, because they're making sentencing guidelines against one guy who is being charged with penalties, that all of a sudden another guy is a felon. Doesn't work that way. Because I can tell you the court's not going to look at it that way. Donald Trump's been charged with nothing. Now, if by chance you end up charging Donald Trump with something, and the sentencing guidelines that you give to Michael Cohen are followed by the court, then you might be able to make some type of argument against Donald Trump being some type of bad guy or worse guy than people want to think he is. But as long as Donald Trump has not even been charged with anything, this is a tale told by an idiot, full of sound and wind, signifying nothing. Now, for those of us who are not as familiar with Shakespeare, I'm not claiming that I am that familiar with Shakespeare, I'll say it this way. This be that chicken crap that horse crap calls bull crap. This is nonsense. Cohen himself has now admitted, with respect to both payments, he acted in coordination with and at the direction of individual one. The payments in question, as the document explains, concern a payoff to two women who have claimed to have affairs with Trump, and they were intended to influence the campaign. Really? Well, how were they going to influence the campaign? Well, he's paying off. So wait a minute. What do we do about that slush fund that Congress kept to pay off all the women that they did wrong? Were any of those payments made during an election? And since Congress runs every other year, there's a good chance that some of those negotiations and payments were effected during a campaign. Should we now make all of these congressmen and senators felons? Should we start looking to impeach or otherwise remove them from office? If you're not going to do that, shut this foolishness up. You're a hypocrite. And here's another thing. Congress is using your money to pay off these women. There is nothing to indicate Donald Trump used anything other than his own money. Oh, that's not true. Michael Cohen made the payments. There is nothing to indicate that Donald Trump told him to use his own money to do anything. He acted. He acted at the direction of Trump. Did Donald Trump say, why don't you dip into your piggy bank and break Stormy Daniels off a little something, something? I don't hear that being alleged. Michael Cohen said he'd take a bullet for the president. What's $130,000? He was a successful attorney. Seems like he was a little bit on the sleazy side, but I'm sorry, he's an attorney. Just so we're clear, if someone uses private money, because that's not what Congress does to handle their business with women who accuse them of things, right or wrong. If someone uses private money to handle private matters, but they're running for office when they use the money, their private money, to handle private matters, then that's a violation of campaign finance law? Really? What kind of pretzel logic is that? So let me get this straight. If I have a delinquent debt, Stacey Abrams, that I use private money to pay off during my failed campaign for governor, Stacey Abrams, is that a violation of campaign finance law? Because it might not be it may not go over well with the voters that they find out that I owe money to everybody and their dog, Stacey Abrams. Oh, it's not a big deal? Then why is it a big deal now? Or more to the point, is it really a big deal? Wow. And by the way, is this why we ignored all of Bobby Mueller's conflict of interest issues so we might be able to investigate? And I put that in air quotes. I thought we were looking for Russian collusion with the Trump campaign during the 2016 election. Isn't that why we're supposed to be here? I mean, unless Stormy Daniels' breast implants were Russian-made, I'm not seeing how this affects the price of tea in China. Well, maybe it affected the tariffs. Maybe we weren't going to have tariffs if whatever. Maybe there's something Russian about the other woman that got paid. Maybe she knows someone who spoke to someone who had coffee with a friend of Vladimir Putin's cousin. I don't know. I'm not getting this. And if we want to get into people for their sexual shenanigans, there's still the matter of the Clinton Rolodex of violated females. I mean, for real, for real. Or how about that chick that Michelle Obama made Barack Obama send off to that no-show job in the Caribbean because she got too close to him during the Senate campaign? Last name is Baker, I believe. Or what about Larry Sinclair, who gave a very public testimony, press conference, talking about all the times that he gave Barack Obama a little extra attention that his wife wasn't giving him? I mean, if we're going to go after people for sexual stuff, and are you saying nobody paid them off? Well, we know that Miss Baker got paid off. Was that a campaign finance issue? I don't know what they did with Sinclair, but if there's any money involved, wasn't that a campaign finance issue? If we're going after people. You see, here's the problem. When the media starts trying to announce winners and losers in the game, instead of just calling the play-by-play of the game, because they ain't called the play-by-play on Obama yet, then they're exactly what the current president has said they are. You're the enemy of the people because you're not telling them the truth. You're not helping to give them an informed opinion. You're trying to give them an opinion. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 FM, North Florida Talk Radio, FreedomInAmericaRadio.com, and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of this first hour. We have what to me is one of the greatest events occurring, or movements even, people love to hear about movements, occurring in the United States right now that correspond with the election of the current president. And that is white people, Caucasians, whatever you want to call them, starting to buck against PC, or political correctness, in such a way that they are not concerned about being called names by people of color, specifically black people. They have actually said, you know what, this stuff you're trying to hang on me, I ain't got nothing to do with it. My family didn't have anything to do with it, and I'm not owning it. And that wasn't happening during the Obama years, because Obama was openly racist against white people. There's no doubt about that. Oh, no, he wasn't. You know what? You have to be a racist Negro to not understand that Obama was a racist. Now, if you don't understand that, that's fine. But look what he did. No, you don't understand it. He hated white people, and he didn't think that much of black people. Now, if you were a Latino who was trying to violate the American border, he got something for you. He got help for you. I don't know how he felt about them, but I know he would help them. But if you were white, I'm going to talk about you in your grill in nice, eloquent terms where somebody doesn't recognize, who ain't down with what's going on, that I'm just a blatant racist. And if you black, I'm going to just pimp slap you and dare you to speak against me because I got a skin tone that looks like yours. That's Barack Obama. And while that was going on, white folks were so afraid of being called racist because we got a black president and we can't say anything. They went along with a whole lot of foolishness that, guess what, they're not having it no more. Now, black folks and others say, well, this is the alt-right, this is affecting the country, we have a racist president. No, we don't. We have a president who is the least racist that I've seen since I've been alive. John Kennedy didn't care for black people. He wasn't against them. He didn't care for black people. Lyndon Johnson used black people. He put them deeper in the black code zone than at any time since Reconstruction, and they're still there. Richard Nixon didn't care about black people. They're okay, but it wasn't no big deal. Donald Trump has no issues with black people. Ronald Reagan, I don't know that he had issues with black people. But what we're looking at now is Donald Trump with his election and the campaign that he ran that said put America first. I'm sorry, where America is 65% white. By some counts even higher than that. You can't be for America and be against white people. As white people go, so goes America. If you don't like where white people are going, there are at least another 190 countries on the planet that might take you. But as it is now, they're speaking up. And they're calling BS on all this attempt to call them racist because they want protection from people coming across the border. They don't want to be discriminated against just because someone doesn't think they have the right skin color. They're tired of being called out of their name over things that they never did, that their families never did. Maybe you missed this email. At the height of slavery, only 6% of the population ever owned slaves, and 40% of the U.S. population has their roots to America tied to Ellis Island, and Ellis Island wasn't even opened until 2 decades after the Civil War was over. Whites in this country have very little to do with slavery today. And even back when it was at its worst, it represented a small percentage of anyone in the United States. Those facts are not widely circulated. And they don't need to be. Because what's been built in America, stop lying with this, America was built on the backs of slaves. No, it wasn't, because what was built on the backs of slaves was destroyed during the Civil War. You had to rebuild, and it wasn't slave labor that rebuilt most of America. You need to talk about some other people. Blacks are included in the rebuilding of America? Of course they are. So is everybody else, including the majority of them being white. Because the majority of the U.S. has always been Caucasian, European, for those who want to be more sophisticated. And now they are, under this administration, speaking out boldly, without issue, without fear. And when somebody calls them a racist, they just say, you know what? And the horse you rode in on, I'm not afraid of your name calling. And the problem for black people, and we'll get more into that a little bit later, is that when whites stand up to the guilt tripping that they try to put there for them, blacks become more politically marginalized because no one's trying to hear that foolishness anymore. They know it. But since they don't have an answer to their own problems, they have to keep up with this 5-decade-long farce of trying to hold white people accountable for everything that's wrong with black folks. It's like that. And I'm going to turn this over now to my good friend Ron Edwards. And after that, we'll be back with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinking.
Democrats are clamoring for the impeachment of Donald Trump. Hello, I'm Ron Edwards. On today's page from the Edwards Notebook, Mrs. Clinton and Mr. Obama are running around free after the Benghazi debacle and the massive sale of U.S. uranium to the Russians and the fake dossier designed to destroy Trump. Adam Shifty Schiff is chomping at the bit to become the next House Intelligence Chairman, claiming that Trump could face jail time for campaign finance charges, including payments to 2 women. The original charge of Russian collusion is without merit. However, the actual reason Democrats and others hope to destroy Trump and his family are: 1, he has stood up to the open border crowd and is fighting to secure our borders and protect our national sovereignty. 2, he brought the economy back from the ruin of the previous administration. Sadly, not one Democrat wants the Americans safe from rampant illegal border crossers. Thus, they are hoping to besmirch Trump's name to the point that Americans will be afraid to publicly support him or his policies during the next election cycle. But I have a funny feeling the Democrats will soon fall on their own sword. I'm Ron Edwards. Join me on Fridays at AmericaMatters.us and SHRmedia.com at 1 p.m. Pacific, 4 p.m. Eastern, and 12 a.m. Sunday on the Talk America Radio Network.
Sponsored by the Tri-County Liberty Coalition.
I have a dream. One day, this nation will rise up, live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
Black Man Thinkin.
Freedom is never more than 1 generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same.
Black Man Thinkin.
Anytime you throw your weight behind a political party that controls 2/3 of the government, and that party can't keep the promise that it made to you during election time, and you're dumb enough to walk around continuing to identify yourself with that party, you're not only a chump, but you're a traitor to your race.
Black Man Thinkin.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. And this idea that government is beholden to the people, that it has no other source of power except the sovereign people, is still the newest and the most unique idea in all the long history of man's relation to man. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Black Man Thinkin.
In this present crisis, government is not the solution to our problem. Government is the problem.
Black Man Thinkin.
Stanley Levy with Hour 2 of Black Man Thinkin' here on the dominant force in Internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com and WLBB News Talk AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Well, despite what everyone thinks and all the lies that the left is telling you, particularly for those considered minorities, you gotta vote, get out and vote, don't boo, vote. There is nothing more worthless in America than an election. And this is because primarily of what our good friend, well, former good friend, and not that much of a friend, Joseph Stalin had to say. It is enough that the people know that there was an election. The people who cast the votes decide nothing. The people who count the votes decide everything. And we have three issues in America that has basically made elections increasingly worthless to the point where the American people are closer than some realize to losing confidence in the electoral system altogether. One is voter fraud. Democrats have made a election strategy of voter fraud since at least the 1960 election. John Kennedy does not win the 1960 election unless they are voting early and often, and especially if you're dead in Chicago, and whatever type of interesting things were going on in Texas in the 1960 election. Without that, he doesn't win. It was very close. Richard Nixon knew that there was cheating going on, but for the good of the country, so it is said, he decided not to challenge the result. And then, of course, John Kennedy gets blown away in the third year of his term, and gets immortalized as the greatest president who ever lived, or at least he had that reputation for some time. The interesting thing about time not only heals all wounds, it melts most myths. And the myth of John Kennedy and Camelot is all but gone, as more and more people who were not affected or weren't alive on the day he was killed are now the ones looking at the events of his presidency. Don't get me wrong, John Kennedy was one of the best speech makers as president, voicing things that were actually in the American interest and motivating Americans to do certain things, like going to the moon, that were extremely beneficial to the country. But he was not anywhere near being the greatest of U.S. presidents. And if it hadn't been for voter fraud, he may not have been a president at all. And now we have people who abuse every conceivable way of registering voters, to the point where if you start looking up, just do an internet search on voter fraud felonies, and the number of occurrences that occur that you can find, and the percentage of them that are Democrat is more than 90%. But Democrats will tell you, well, there's really no voter fraud occurring. Then what's with all these convictions? Why is it that we're finding out that a good chunk of the Hillary Clinton popular vote victory, those votes were cast by people who had no business in the country, let alone showing up at a voting place or filling out any type of mail-in ballot? Why are we finding out in this election that ballots are being manufactured? Oh, that brings us to the second thing that's making elections worthless, and we saw it in this most recent election. Election fraud. The good witch doctor Brenda Snipes held Broward County hostage for, I don't know how long, was it a month almost? As she counted and recounted and kept checking the results to see how many more votes she needed to count to try to elect Andrew Gillum, that socialist disaster from Tallahassee, and to re-elect Bill Nelson, who only shows up in the state talking about how much he cares when it's election time, which is once every 6 years. She failed. And her sister from another mother in Palm Beach County also failed as well. Of all the counties in Florida, only those two had a problem getting their votes in on time. And then in California, you have almost a month after the election is over, 4.5 million votes aren't counted in the state school superintendent race? Seriously? 4.5 million votes not counted. And then you have the disaster in Orange County, which is just fascinating. You have a Republican candidate for governor who had no chance at winning statewide. He wins in Orange County, but all 6 of the Republican candidates for Congress lose. And Orange County is the most reliably Republican part of the California coast. Republican territory. They've called it the Orange Curtain for Republicanism. Get behind the Orange Curtain. And all of a sudden, not one congressional representative from the districts in Orange County are Republican. But the Republican for governor carried all 6 congressional districts. Hilarious. And every one of them was one of those, okay, we have the vote from election night, but now we got to go in and figure out what the real count is. We have election fraud in this country. I did a segment on that maybe a couple of weeks ago, and it is numbering in double-digit states, and that first number is not a 1. People cheat, and the people who cheat are almost always Democrats. And they're brazen about it. Well, you're trying to say that Democrats are cheat. Yeah, they are cheaters. Well, what about Republicans? Republicans either don't cheat or they're much better at it than Democrats. Because when you look it up, you just don't find the incidents that you see there. However, we have something else, a third element, that is really tough for elections to be valid or viable in this country in the minds of the electorate anymore. And that's what I call the legislative nullification of the electorate. What am I talking about? Well, I'll tell you. 31 states, for example, via popular vote, they passed various amendments to their state constitutions against homosexual marriage. California, the state in which I live, did it twice. Yet not only is homosexual marriage legal in the U.S., it's all but promoted because elected and appointed government actors declared the people's express will to be wrong. And if that's the case, why bother to vote? Now, ignore that for a minute, because I know how people feel about that, not that I care. And let's look at something that the left supports. Marijuana. Legalized marijuana. Now, no matter what you think of marijuana, and this only matters because your opinion only matters if you live in this particular state, which is Utah. Here's what I'm talking about. How is your express will viewed by the government? In the November elections, last month's elections, and over the opposition of the Mormon Church, which is a very powerful political influence in the state of Utah, the people of Utah voted 53 to 47 to legalize medical marijuana via a ballot initiative known as Proposition 2. The people went in, they voted, yet 2 days after their will went into effect, the state legislature supplanted the people's will. They supplanted that vote with the Utah Medical Cannabis Act, a measure hammered out as a compromise between Proposition 2 supporters and opponents. Kind of brings up the question. Now, Utah Governor Gary Herbert, he had said he will hold a special session to pass the compromise agreement regardless of whether voters approve Proposition 2. So I know you guys are going to have an election, but I don't really give a rat's behind. We're going to get us a compromise. Bump y'all, which is exactly what he said. And 2 days after Proposition 2 went into effect, it was replaced by a compromise. Now, so what? But isn't disputed issues, don't you put them to a vote of the people as a way to resolve the issues? Oh, now here's the kicker. Since the legislature passed its compromise bill with more than a 2/3 majority, the state says their action cannot be challenged by voters. Yeah. That to me that's fascinating. Fox 13 in Utah did a report on the results of the election and the replacement bill by the Utah legislature, and this is what they had to say.
The legislature swapped out the voter-approved Proposition 2, and the governor signed it into law. Now, Utah has a medical cannabis program, so what does that mean for patients? Fox 13's Ben Winslow explains.
With the legislature's vote, Utah will have a medical cannabis program in operation by 2020. But it's not quite what you voted on.
It's been kind of an overall reining in of the policies.
The Utah Patients Coalition, which sponsored Prop 2 and negotiated this bill, says it's about 85% of what's in the initiative. The biggest change is state-run dispensaries.
There will be a pharmacist required at every dispensary.
Patients under 21 who want cannabis must go before a compassionate use board made up of physicians and others. The number of private dispensaries has shrunk. Marijuana flower is still allowed, but in certain formats. Nurse practitioners, physician assistants, doctors, and even some social workers can recommend cannabis. The affirmative defense is largely the same, and sponsors think the definition of pain is a little better.
Our hope is that no patients are left off this list. We're going to continue to work for that.
Some still want what voters approved.
I'm mad as hell, and I'm not going to take it any longer.
A newly formed group called the People's Right is challenging the legislature's decision. They want a new referendum.
Every one of you was excluded from the process with a big middle finger from the legislature and the governor's office who say that we are a compound republic.
Under Utah law, the legislature has the power to modify citizen ballot initiatives or swap them out altogether. In fact, many of the same lawmakers who voted for this compromise were reelected on the same ballot that voters approved Prop 2.
I understand the anger, I do. But this is the realities of our state and our legislature, and we are going to work within those realities.
On the Hill, Ben Winslow, Fox 13 News, Utah.
So again, I ask, why vote? You go to vote, they call a special session, they replace your will with a compromise that you did not approve, and they do it in such a way that you can't challenge it. And now voters, they actually have people suing the government. They have to sue the government that erased their will, hoping it will hear in court what it ignored at the polls. So, and again, why vote? And that is where Americans are coming to. Something's going to have to give. I have an idea of what it should be. I don't know exactly what it will be. So whether the issue is homosexual marriage or medical marijuana, government, elected and appointed, are less interested in your direction than in your submission. They want you to toe the line. And don't you dare talk back, even though I thought they worked for you. Never mind. And if you think governmental arrogance toward voters and governmental disdain for voters is just limited to issues like medical marijuana and homosexual marriage, then you have another thing coming. And when you add this to the transparent vote counting fraud in this same November election in Florida and Georgia and across the country, let's be clear. A people whose government ignores their express will regarding how their society shall be ordered, that's not a people. Not at all. Those are chattel. And they will remain chattel until their will is implemented rather than merely considered or observed or solicited. Further, if you believe this is something you can resolve by dutifully traipsing down to your local precinct when next they invite you to give an opinion, even though ballots are meant to be directives, then you've really no understanding of what government of, by, and for the people really is. Playing Mother May I with those you pay to implement your decisions simply demonstrate that you have a seriously jacked up parentage. You can't vote to fix a broken electoral system. You're going to have to do something else. Otherwise, you will be so marginalized that what progressives want for you will be implemented, not because you didn't get to make your input, but because your input was overrun by those who don't give a rat's behind what you think and take your money to do what's not in your interest. You can do nothing, or you can grab what you need to grab to go do what you need to do. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, talkamericaradio.us. Also, WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Let's talk about abortion a little bit, shall we? And specifically in Ohio, because they are really turning up the heat on Planned Parenthood and abortion supporters. And this goes back to something that's happened very recently. Well, actually, it happened first 2 years ago. 2 years ago, 2016, the Ohio State Legislature passed a strict heartbeat bill, which pretty much forbid abortions. You can't kill a child in the womb once a heartbeat is detected. Okay. That went all the way to Governor John Kasich, who vetoed it, and the same guy who's trying to tell us that God is watching us on illegal immigration deferred to the U.S. Constitution, saying, well, you know, we shouldn't do what the Supreme Court's not going to allow. Well, wow, that's interesting. I find that perspective interesting. God is really watching us as to whether or not we allow illegal immigrants to violate our border. So that law is not sacrosanct, but we do have to respect the woman's quote-unquote right to kill what God has conceived in her. That is the line that we must not cross if we are to be godly people in the mind of John Kasich. A fascinating dichotomy there. Nevertheless, they passed that bill. He vetoed that bill, and everybody took a slight deep breath and exhaled, and if they were relaxing, they relaxed too soon. Because on the 12th, the Ohio Senate passed the strict heartbeat abortion restrictions. Now, the bill's got to go back to the House in Ohio, House of Representatives, or the Assembly, before getting to Governor John Kasich's desk, and he's vowed to veto the bill, which would ban abortions as soon as 6 weeks after conception. But I find it interesting that anybody who's going to cite God in the treatment of people would ever oppose a bill that kept people from being killed, innocent people from being killed. Anyway, the Ohio Senate on December 12th passed one of the nation's strictest regulations on abortion, so-called heartbeat bill that would outlaw abortions as soon as 6 weeks after conception. But the vote shook out at 18-13 for the legislation, that's in the Senate. As 4 Republicans crossed the aisle to vote against it, that means it likely wouldn't have the 20-vote margin needed to override a threatened veto by the governor. 2 amendments clarifying that the law doesn't require vaginal ultrasounds and allowing the state's medical board to suspend a physician's license on an emergency basis before being tried under the new law. The bill must go back to the House again before it reaches the desk. They got to look at those things and see what they want to do with it. But are you picking up on this? Ohio is serious about not killing children in the womb. Ohio is not the only state that's getting more and more serious about it. And they're not afraid of the Supreme Court. John Kasich, who thinks somebody's going to actually want him to be president one day, well, John, we tried that already. We tried that in 2016. And your name is mud outside the state of Ohio. You do realize that. And I know that you're being goaded by CNN to step up and do whatever, but no. It's not what you do. Nobody wants you. Now, the bill passed the Ohio House 58-35 back in November, and just shy of the 60-vote number to protect it from a Kasich veto. But if they go back and make these changes and the House votes again, then they're probably going to have those votes. And if they make other votes, make those changes, the Senate may get to the 20-vote mark. Republican Senator Bill Coley told media that he's been cautious about bills this strict in the past, but that he believes that recent conservative additions to the U.S. Supreme Court could make the law legally viable. Other lawmakers supporting the legislation said the bill protects the unborn. Can we finally get to the point where we stop talking about women who are inconvenienced and children who are dying? And I'm really over all the BS arguments and what about incest and rape? Well, why don't you go read what Alan Guttmacher Institute says, and they're the research arm for Planned Parenthood. More than 98.5% of all abortions are not done for any of that. Less than 1% each. If you're talking about mother's health, rape, or incest, that is what takes up less than 1.5% of all abortions in the U.S. Everything else is because the mother just doesn't want to be bothered with a kid, and it's better to kill that child than to quote-unquote mess up her life. Of course, since you weren't raped and you're not the victim of incest, then, of course, you could have avoided all this by being responsible, but, perish the thought that we would actually hold females in this society accountable for this sexual behavior. But what about men? You're not a man. Let me make that clear, just in case you missed it. That was a man that was inside you, impregnating you. You are not a man. You could have stopped that at any time. And if he decided to go past your no, since you are so big about rape culture, you could have said, get him. And then most in the United States would have said, well, if you were impregnated as a result of a crime being committed against you, then we will tolerate you killing your child. But Ohio is not necessarily feeling that. Let's be clear, and this is from the ACLU of Ohio Policy Director Jocelyn Rosnick. Let's be clear, the Ohio Senate just passed a total abortion ban. Yes, they're packaging it as 6 weeks, but in reality, most women don't even know they're pregnant at that time, and it will be impossible for them to access abortion when they find out. This last-minute legislative fiasco is not in the best interest of Ohio women and families, and is the result of Ohio legislators who want to interfere with a woman's constitutional right to choose. John Kasich has stated in the past that he plans to override this bill should it reach his desk, and we urge him to remember that promise and to follow through with a veto. If he doesn't veto it, or if it comes up again next year, then, you're going to have some problems. You got to understand, more than half the country has state legislatures that are not favoring abortion and would just as soon see abortion overturned. Let me help you out with something, because not everybody's understanding this. Donald Trump is not pro-abortion. That doesn't necessarily mean he's anti-abortion either, because Donald Trump is a longtime liberal. He's a product of the environment he grew up in, and that's New York City. However, Donald Trump doesn't think that people should be killed just because. And here is what people keep forgetting. If Roe v. Wade if it is challenged and ends up before the Supreme Court, and the challenge succeeds, abortion does not become illegal. Abortion becomes something that the federal government no longer concerns itself with. It simply becomes a matter to be decided by the states. And that is a fight that Planned Parenthood and other abortion supporters do not want. They want to fight the battle for killing children on one front. They know that if the federal government removes its hand, they can't win on 50 fronts. They won't win on 50 fronts because the people don't want children killed in their state in all 50 states. Let me help you out with something else. For those who are interested in marijuana, and we talked about in the last segment, the same guy who doesn't want the states involved in doesn't want the federal government involved in killing children, do you really think he wants the federal government involved in whether or not somebody has access to marijuana legally? Whether for recreational or medical purposes? Let me help you out. The same guy has the same policy with respect to both. If you boil it all down, he would just as soon have the federal government out of both of those, which would make it an interesting country. But that's what we're supposed to be. We're supposed to be working out these things. Liberty and freedom are messy. It's not a clean, straight line. That's called slavery. That's a clean, straight line. You don't make no decisions. We don't have to hear from you. Do what you're told, and you move on. That is what progressives want on abortion. It's already been decided. We don't want to hear from you. Move on. But more and more states are pushing back. The Supreme Court is now more reliably 5-4 in the conservative column. And once Ruth Bader Ginsburg goes on to her reward, which is likely to occur in my mind during the Trump presidency, then Planned Parenthood and so-called abortion rights are seriously going to be on the clock. Planned Parenthood will no longer be funded by federal dollars because the states will start pulling that funding. They'll block that funding. And with the federal government having nothing to say about abortion, if that occurs, there will be no way to protect those dollars going to Planned Parenthood. This is going to be wonderful. Because a country that actually values life can actually be a great country. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking. We'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinking, here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Anybody remember Black Girl Magic? Still a term that gets tossed around every now and again. And, of course, now we've seen an uptick in leftist, at least, females of color seeking political office and looking to make policy decisions, and it's being touted as a good thing, as good diversity. And let me help you out. It is the worst thing that can happen. It's the worst thing that can happen to the country. It is also the worst thing that can happen to black people. It is horrific. Period. I say that again, period. Let's start with the most recent examples of hideous black females seeking and gaining office. Rachel Rollins is now the district attorney in Suffolk County, Massachusetts. It's in the Boston area. She has a very interesting impact or approach to prison reform. It's called She Will Not Prosecute the following crimes: trespassing, shoplifting, larceny, disorderly conduct, disturbing the peace, receiving stolen property, driving offenses, breaking and entering, wanton or malicious destruction of property, threats, excluding domestic violence. So you can threaten anybody else you want to, but if you go after women with domestic violence, then there's a problem. Wow. Minors in possession of alcohol, drug possession with intent to distribute, a standalone resisting arrest charge, a resisting arrest charge combined with only charges that all fall under the list of charges that she's already declined to prosecute. This is her idea of how to keep black people out of jail. Simply don't prosecute them for what they do wrong. Police in Suffolk County took issue with this. And back in September, she responded to CBS in Boston in the following way.
Tonight, a candidate for Suffolk County DA drawing some criticism from police who say she has a risky plan to reform criminal justice. Rachel Rollins has laid out a list of crimes that she says she wouldn't prosecute if elected. That includes trespassing, breaking and entering, and resisting arrest. Here's WBZ's Christina Rex.
This, I think, is a really good example of how communities of color feel like law enforcement handles them.
rather than coming to me and speaking to me about something they disagreed about, they went to the Herald and had a story.
Suffolk County Democratic District Attorney candidate Rachel Rollins fires back at criticism from law enforcement to her decline to prosecute list.
How we could divert away from nonviolent crimes and turn our attention to the violent ones.
The list, 15 crimes long, are charges that the DA candidate wants to stop prosecuting for and instead find alternate solutions. The controversial proposal winning her praise from President Obama today.
Do what they just did in Philadelphia and Boston, and elect state's attorneys and district attorneys who are looking at issues in a new light.
On the list of charges, shoplifting, destruction of property, and possession with intent to distribute, a charge that has garnered national criticism because of the ongoing opioid epidemic.
If we decide to remove that from the list, we will.
Do you agree that that might be the most controversial one on the list?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I wouldn't disagree with that statement.
The president of the Boston Police Patrolmen's Association tells WBZ that he fears what Rollins' policies could mean for police officers, writing, "I'm afraid if there are no consequences, offenders will figure, why not resist? Our job is already dangerous. It's unbelievable to think people are willing to make it more dangerous for us." Rollins says she's disappointed she didn't hear from the association personally and says she plans to talk with them in the future.
Call me. You know where I am.
In November, Rollins will run against independent candidate Michael Maloney. Now, according to his campaign website, he plans to stop prosecuting for nonviolent drug offenses as well. In Jamaica Plain, Christina Rex, WBZ News.
First off, they're crazy in Suffolk County, Massachusetts. They're dumb. They're idiots. Because only an idiot would vote for this woman. Police officers there should simply stop. They should help her by no longer responding to criminal calls. Just simply and let me be clear about this. It is the people of color who will be hurt. It is the crimes in those communities which will go unresponded to. No one's going to deal with that. If you're telling me as a police officer that if someone resists arrest and they won't even be prosecuted for that, then guess what? I won't try to arrest anybody. I will simply wait to put up tape and draw a chalk outline where somebody fell, because I'm not going to risk my safety when the idiot district attorney is not going to back me up. It's not going to happen. This is dangerous for everybody, and especially dangerous for black people, because the type of things that she's talking about happen in black communities at an alarming rate. And it is the root of a great amount of crime that leads to and is not limited to homicide. This is really someone saying, you know what, I saw the movie The Purge and I thought it was a good idea. Instead of doing it one night a year, let's just do it every night and see how it turns out. I already know how it's going to turn out. It's just a matter of how long it takes to get there. What you're going to see are people arming themselves. You're going to see more folks ending up dead because the only way to protect themselves from criminals is to shoot them yourself. You can't call the police because the police can't do anything. If they do anything, it's going to get thrown out. So what are your alternatives? But remember, these are the same idiots who voted for her. So I have no sympathy. If you want the Purge script to be played out in your neighborhood, you're a fool. And if you voted for somebody who was going to do that, you're a fool. I also have an issue with her trying to say, well, the police never talked to me. Did you seek them out before you came up with this nonsense? That you're not going to prosecute resisting arrest charges? Wow. I know you didn't. This isn't all about Rachel Rollins in Massachusetts. We have forgotten the two Baltimore bozos, one of them being Mayor Stephanie Rawlings Blake at the time in 2015 when those riots occurred. How many of you remember these words from her?
Did you have a sense that they might try to go that way?
Well, we've had these types of conversations before, and I've made it very clear that I worked with the police and instructed them to do everything that they could to make sure that the protesters were able to exercise their right to free speech. It's a very delicate balancing act, because while we tried to make sure that they were protected from the cars and the other things that were going on, we also gave those who wished to destroy space to do that as well. And we worked very hard to keep that balance and to put ourselves in the best position to de-escalate. And that's what you saw this evening.
Did you hear that foolishness? So I hear the same thing from Rachel Rollins today that we heard from Stephanie Rollins Blake 3 years ago, which is, I'm going to put the interests of those who want to do harm above those who should not be harmed. Well, those who wanted to destroy, give them space to do. Whose stuff were they destroying? Oh, that's right, they were black folks rioting in a black neighborhood. So a black woman doesn't give a rat's behind about black folks' stuff getting towed up by other black folks, which is the same thing that Rachel Rollins is saying today. And for those of you who forgot, the idiot Marilyn Mosby, who is state's attorney in Baltimore, who couldn't get a conviction on the 6 officers she prosecuted in Freddie Gray's death because they had nothing to do with his death, no matter what the negrosity clowns say, they didn't. And a black judge was among the jurors who heard their cases and said, you have no evidence. Let these people go. But this was her with respect to coming up with a probable cause for what she's doing and telling everybody to how they should behave while we're dealing with these unproven charges that she wants to bring against police officers.
To the people of Baltimore and the demonstrators across America, I heard your call for no justice, no peace. Your peace is sincerely needed as I work to deliver justice on behalf of this young man. To those that are angry, hurt, or have their own experiences of injustice at the hands of police officers, I urge you to channel the energy peacefully as we prosecute this case. I have heard your calls for no justice, no peace. However, your peace is sincerely needed as I work to deliver justice on behalf of Freddie Gray. To the rank and file officers of the Baltimore City Police Department, please know that these accusations of these 6 officers are not an indictment on the entire force.
That's one lying critter right there. You're going to charge us, you have no evidence, you jumped the gun to even file the charges, but this is not a blanket endorsement. You're telling everybody about, oh gosh, look, if you've ever had anything going on with the police, I'm going to go get justice for Freddie Gray had more court cases than he had birthdays. And if you're seeking justice, you're supposed to seek justice for everybody involved in the case, not just the folks that you prefer. Let me help you out. Black, female politicians are going to get somebody killed. Oh, that's right. In Baltimore, the murder rate spiked so high that they had a higher murder rate they had more homicides in Baltimore than they did in New York, I think, in 2015. And New York has 13 times the population of Baltimore. Black females are going to get you killed. Understand that. And don't forget Stacey Abrams. She was out there too, because the Family Policy Alliance of Georgia put it out there. Stacey Abrams is dangerous for Georgia's children. Many of you have heard about the 5-year-old girl who was assaulted in the bathroom at her Decatur elementary school. Decatur's in DeKalb County. Whole lot of black folks there. Just letting you know. An assault made possible because of the radical pro-transgender policy that puts the LGBTQ agenda over the needs and interests of young students. The innocence of this young girl has been irreparably violated, and the liberals running Decatur schools are refusing to reverse course. But these are the kinds of policies supported by Stacey Abrams, and she's already proven she doesn't care about the safety of our kids. She's placed her liberal agenda above Georgia children when she opposed measures that would have kept sex offenders away from schools and kept them from photographing children. She even took a walk on a vote to crack down on sex trafficking. Let me make this abundantly clear. Leftist black females are dangerous. They are dangerous to the public, and they are especially dangerous to black people. The fact that black people would even support these buffoons is beyond me. I'll go on record. I will not. I'm going to make it broad. I'm going to make somebody mad. If you are a black female who is seeking political office, miss me with your campaign rhetoric. I will not vote for you. I will not think about voting for you. I see what black females have done to the black community since 1964. And the last thing I want is for them to have political power so they can continue to devastate the black community as no one else has. The Klan is jealous of black women and their ability to destroy black lives. They've done it in court. They've done it in clinics. And now they want to do it in political office. Black girl magic gets people killed, gets people harmed, gets people violated. And if you don't want to recognize that, that's fine. As the body count rises, as the violations of law rise, as the crime goes unchecked in your streets because you wanted to say, go ahead, girl, just know that I'm not down with it. Because somebody's going to die. People already have behind black girl magic, and I'm not going to be party to it. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', we'll be back right after this. Stanley Levy, Black Man Thinkin', here on the dominant force in internet conservatism, TalkAmericaRadio.us. Also WDDQ, Talk 92.1 FM in Valdosta, Georgia. WJHC, Talk 107.5 North Florida Talk Radio. FreedomInAmericaRadio.com. And WLBB News Talk, AM 1330 and FM 106.3 in Carrollton, Georgia. Final segment of the show. At the end of the last hour, I talked about how white males seem to be standing up to political correctness, no longer allowing themselves to be portrayed as weak or racist or rapists. By contrast, black males are still PC whipped. And for those who understand another term, they know exactly what I did with that one. I'll give you a great example. Kareem Hunt, who was recently cut by the Kansas City Chiefs because he allegedly beat and kicked a woman in a hotel. Actually, that's an overstatement. And what, of course, is left out is how the woman provoked the action and actually began the physical altercation. Well, that doesn't matter. He's bigger than her. I said, well, if it doesn't matter, why? So what you're trying to say is everything a woman does is okay. Well, he kicked her. The kick he gave her wouldn't even gotten a helium balloon off the ground. If he wanted to do damage to her, she would be damaged. She would have been hospitalized. She was not. As a matter of fact, the police came to the hotel room, interviewed everyone there, saw the video at the time, and declined to press charges. Nevertheless, Kareem Hunt went on this great mea culpa apology tour, not standing up for the to oppose the disrespect he was shown by an underage drinking white teenage girl. That's what she was. He found out that she was underage and kicked her out of his room, and she went out and spent 30 minutes calling him Negro, or word to that effect, in public in a hotel room. When he went out to confront her about it, she attacked him. I think he showed restraint. But because he has no marketable skills aside from being able to run with a football, and the NFL has zero testosterone, as you can tell by the way they're playing the game. If you hit somebody, that's a 15-yard penalty. he knuckled under, and now he's going to do his penance so he can play Mother May I to the NFL and get back to the only thing he knows how to do. Well, wouldn't you do that? No, I wouldn't. And I'm sad that he did. I am sad that black men still are behind white men in standing up to being disrespected. I'm sad that black men, instead of standing up and being men, are playing victim and acting as though they are creating victims when they simply act like they have testosterone. It's ridiculous. Well, no woman should be hit, and no man should ever be disrespected by a woman. You need to make those things just as clear. If you don't want a man to touch you, don't you ever disrespect him. And I guarantee you that he's not likely to ever touch you. Well, that's not always true. Then those individuals need to be prosecuted. But once I see you get up in a man's face and you want to act like a man and you're not a man, I don't care if he treats you like one. But black men are still whipped by political correctness. They don't have they're not displaying the testosterone that white males are showing with the election of Donald Trump, to be honest with you. Well, he's not our guy. Excuse me. He's done more for you than any president in your lifetime. You have the lowest unemployment rate in recorded history under Donald Trump. But he's racist. Please explain to me how he's racist if you're doing well. And why are you not using your ability to do well to stand up for yourselves, stand up for your family, and stand against these policies that have weakened your community, weakened your families, and made you a minstrel show? It's disgusting to me. And I'm tired of it. But I can't say that I understand that most black men are tired of it yet. Which is why, until that changes, the so-called black community will never be that again. Cannot be. Until black men start demanding the respect that white men are starting to ask for. But you have to drop the victim mentality. You have to stop complaining about whitey. You got to be willing to stand on your own 2 feet and compete, which you are able to do if you stop listening to progressives. And that's our show. God bless you. God keep you is always my prayer. And until next time, do take care.
You've been listening to Black Man Thinkin' with your host, Stan Levy. Join Stan midnight to 2 a.m. That's late Monday night into early Tuesday morning. And find him on the web at Black Man Thinkin' without the G. That's blackmanthinkin.com.